Mike, I grew up poor and black in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And grew up in Spencer, Oklahoma, primarily. And my dad was a pastor, so I'm the youngest of 6 boys. I have a sister 3 years younger than me, so grew up just on the other side of the street from the other kids, and so life was different from me. Growing up, we were segregated until the 6th grade, and then we were went to school with everybody. And so that's my experience here in Oklahoma. I do want to insert this into this podcast early. One of the things I grew up with, though, as I grew up PO, that's minus an O and minus an R in Oklahoma. I was privileged, and I have no problem sharing my privilege, which was a mom and dad that were both, though albeit poor and PO, they both had college degrees. Mm-hmm. And so I was privileged around my peers that I was growing up with. Many of them grew up without a father in the home or the stability that I had in my home. So I was privileged, and I have no problem enjoying my privilege. And I don't think anyone should feel guilty for having privilege. The only problem is when we feel like we were kind of better than others, and we just don't want to recognize that. So that's the abbreviated version of who I am. Life was tough, though, looking kind of through that lens of black and poverty and impoverished in Oklahoma, looking at what was going on with the civil rights. I was a kid. I was too young to know what was going on, but just aware enough to be afraid. And so I still have that fear kind of in my dreams, in my mind, that of what I grew up with, and now seeing some of the same issues we're still struggling as a society to be unified and whatnot. So that's the abbreviated version.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got time, so I want to dive into this stuff. The one thing that, like you said, you grew up with mom and dad that were college grads. Mm-hmm. So you had an example from early on that mom and dad, valued school education, and that being the youngest of 6 boys, did you see your older brothers kind of do that, go to school and kind of say you had something to follow after as well?
Yeah, so my oldest brother was kind of the guy I'm following after. He was went to the Air Force. 2 of my brothers went to Vietnam, and but faith in education was a priority in our home, and so I did have those guys to imitate, to emulate. My oldest brother graduated with electronic technology, and that's what I started out in pursuit of. So I did have the privilege of watching others make mistakes, but watching others kind of pave a way for me and whatnot. And so I'm super, super, super grateful. And I'll try not to use that word again, but I'm super grateful for the privilege of growing up in a very healthy family of love and nurturing. And I did not know that my life was the exception, Mike, until I got older. And in fact, I graduated with 4 of the guys that we were super close. We called ourselves the Sophisticated Gents from Star Spencer High School. And it wasn't until we were all 40 and we met for dinner one evening. And those guys told me for the first time, all of them had more than I had. In terms of economic advantage, if you would, in their home. And it was crazy how this conversation with these 5 black guys get around to this point. But these guys told me that every one of them were jealous and or envious of me. I said, what? And we never had that conversation. We talk about girls, cars, tell all our lies about who was best in sports and all that. And this conversation swung around to these guys saying, we were all jealous of you. And it really helped me to just kind of look at the way many of our children are growing up in our schools without some of those things. And one of my passions is to try to make sure that those resources that I took for granted then are made available and accessible to children and for the broader society out there that don't realize how difficult it is for many of our children and our families. We're telling people to pull themselves up by a bootstrap, and there are no boots, there are no straps. And so unless some of us reach out and give them a hand, they're not going to overcome these formidable odds.